This sick little girl was on a flight for life-saving medical treatment, but before everything could go right, a millionaire on board said, "Jump from this plane." But what happened next was even worse. Comment what you think will happen and subscribe to my channel to support my work. The old twin-engine plane shuddered with light turbulence as it crossed the cloudy skies of upstate New York. Trent Sterling adjusted his Italian silk tie, an automatic gesture that revealed his discomfort. Through the oval window, dark clouds billowed on the horizon, foreshadowing a storm. But it wasn't the weather that made his heart race. His eyes couldn't stray from the small figure sitting across the aisle. A girl of approximately 5 years old, blonde hair falling over her forehead, held firmly to a teddy bear equipped with a toy oxygen mask. There was something familiar about that rebellious strand that stubbornly covered her eyes. Something that disturbed him deeply, even without knowing why. "Mr. Sterling, we need your signature on these documents urgently," said Bethany LeConte, leaning over the tray table with a folder full of papers. Her melodious voice carried a tone of urgency that didn't match her impeccable power suit. "And pearl necklace." Trent took a deep breath, trying to concentrate on the contracts in front of him. As CEO of one of the largest medical equipment companies in the country, he was used to making quick decisions involving millions. But something about this situation bothered him. Bethany's excessive haste, the way she insisted that only his signature could save little Lily's life. Nurse Marlene Kohler, hired in a hurry to accompany the flight, watched the scene with attentive eyes. Her fingers drummed restlessly on the medical kit in her lap. There was tension in her face, as if she held a secret that consumed her from within. A new bout of turbulence shook the aircraft. Lily let out a sharp cry, clinging tightly to the teddy bear. Her eyes filled with tears and her small body began to tremble. Panic was etched on her pale face. Trent felt something break inside him. Without thinking, he stood up and knelt before the girl. The sudden gesture made Bethany interrupt her litany about the documents, and the pilot, Captain Oswald, cast a curious glance in the rearview mirror. "Lily," Trent whispered, his deep voice softer than it had ever been. "I want you to jump from this plane." A deathly silence filled the cabin. Nurse Marlene dropped her kit, and Bethany gaped. Only the noise of the engines filled the tense air. But before anyone could protest, Trent pulled a small toy parachute he'd bought at the airport gift shop from his pocket. "Let's take an imaginary trip," he continued, gently swinging the toy before the girl's wide eyes. "Sometimes, when we're very scared, we need to leave it outside, floating in the clouds." To everyone's surprise, a shy smile began to form on Lily's lips. Her little hands let go of the teddy bear and reached for the colorful parachute. For a brief moment, the fear seemed to dissipate from her face. Trent returned to his seat, feeling Bethany's disapproving gaze burning on the back of his neck. He turned his attention back to the documents, trying to ignore the strange sensation that smile had awakened in him. It was then that his fingers found something clipped between the pages of the contract. An old photograph, faded with time. The paper was creased at the corners, as if it had been handled countless times. In it, a young woman held a baby in her arms. Her smile was radiant, full of love, and that strand of blonde hair falling over the child's forehead. The world seemed to slow down. The air became dense, difficult to breathe. Trent knew that face, knew that smile. It was Eileen O'Connell, the EMT who had saved him from the fire at his factory 6 years ago, the woman he had loved and abandoned, prioritizing his career and his empire. Unable to contain himself, Trent stood up abruptly and disappeared. Behind the velvet curtain that separated the cabin, the convulsive sobbing that followed startled the passengers, but no one dared to check what had happened. Marlene took advantage of the commotion to discreetly examine her medical bag. Her eyes narrowed upon finding suspicious marks on Lily's exposed arm. Something was very wrong with this story, and she needed to alert Trent before it was too late. The storm finally reached the plane, which now shook with greater intensity. But the real turbulence was just beginning, and none of those present could imagine the devastating revelations that awaited them at the end of this journey. The turbulence intensified, and Marlene fought against time. Her years of experience as a nurse screamed that something was wrong, while everyone focused on Trent's crying that still echoed from behind the curtain. She took the opportunity to examine more closely Bethany's bag, which she had carelessly left on the seat when going to check on her boss. What she found made her stomach churn. Hidden in a side compartment was a vial of sedatives with dosages far exceeding what was recommended for a child. The purple bruises she had noticed on Lily's arms were beginning to make a terrible sense, but she couldn't make accusations without concrete proof. "You shouldn't be touching other people's things." Bethany's cutting voice caught her by surprise. Marlene quickly closed the bag, but the look she exchanged with Lily's guardian made it clear that both knew too much. Trent finally emerged from behind the curtain. His eyes were red and swollen, but there was something different about his posture. The usual arrogance of the successful businessman had given way to an almost palpable fragility. He carried the crumpled photo in his hand, and his fingers trembled slightly. "Bethany," his voice came out hoarsely, "I need you to explain some things to me." Before he could continue, Lily began to cough violently. Her small face turned red with the effort, and she squeezed her chest with her tiny hands. Marlene rushed to help her, but Bethany was faster. "See why we need your signature urgently?" She practically screamed, administering medication into the girl's arm. "Every minute lost can be fatal." Trent watched the scene with a devastated look. The resemblance between Lily and the baby in the photo was undeniable. But how hadn't he noticed it before? How had he allowed his obsession with work to blind him to something so important? "Eileen." He murmured the name almost like a prayer. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She tried. Marlene couldn't contain herself. "I checked the hospital records when I was hired for this flight. Eileen O'Connell tried to contact you dozens of times after the fire. All attempts were blocked by your secretary, who was following your express orders not to forward personal calls." The weight of that revelation hit Trent like a punch. He remembered the weeks after the fire, when he obsessively immersed himself in work to make up for lost time during his recovery. He remembered giving that absurd order, fearing that Eileen would distract him from his goals. "It doesn't matter anymore," Bethany interrupted sharply. "What matters is that Lily needs that surgery within the next 24 hours, or her heart may stop, and it will only happen if you sign the transfer of the shares." But Trent wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were fixed on Lily, who was now sleeping, sedated by the medicine. That stubborn strand of hair, so like his own when he was a child, the shape of her nose, identical to her mother's. How had he been so blind? "Where is Eileen now?" he asked, fearing the answer. The silence that followed was deafening. Bethany nervously adjusted her pearl necklace, avoiding his gaze. It was Marlene who answered, her voice laden with regret. "She passed away 3 months ago, Mr. Sterling. A car accident when she was returning from yet another attempt to find you." The world seemed to collapse around Trent. Images of Eileen flooded his mind. Her gentle smile while she cared for him in the hospital, their late-night conversations, the last kiss before he chose his ambition over love. And how did Bethany become Lily's guardian? He questioned, a new suspicion growing in his chest. "The documents are all in order," Bethany replied quickly, extending a folder. "I was appointed by Child Protective Services after Eileen's death. Ms. O'Connell had no other relatives." But something in the tone of her voice didn't ring true. Marlene noticed that her hands trembled slightly as she organized the papers. The nurse had seen similar cases before, guardians who took advantage of sick children to extort money from rich people, but she never imagined getting involved in something so big. The plane began its descent, shaking with the increasingly strong turbulence. Trent stared at the documents in his hands, his world crumbling with each line he read. Years of wrong decisions, of distorted priorities, culminating in this terrible moment. "There's something wrong with these papers," he murmured, more to himself than to the others. "You have no choice," Bethany cut in, her voice now laced with a veiled threat. "Either you sign the transfer of the shares now, or I don't authorize the surgery. And we all know what will happen to Lily in that case." The pilot announced the imminent landing. Marlene nervously gripped her medical kit, knowing she needed to make a decision. The evidence she had found in Bethany's bag could change everything, but revealing it now could put Lily at even greater risk. Trent looked out the window, seeing the city lights approaching. In a few hours he could lose everything, his company, his fortune, and possibly the only chance to know his daughter. Guilt consumed him from within, corroding every certainty he had once held. What none of them noticed was the feverish glint in Lily's eyes, who wasn't completely asleep. Nor the small recorder hidden in Marlene's bag, recording every word of that devastating conversation. The truth was about to come out, but its price could be too high. The public hospital was crowded when the group arrived. Bethany kept a possessive arm around Lily, practically dragging the girl through the corridors while holding a folder with documents against her chest. Trent followed them like a tormented shadow, his eyes never leaving the small figure of his daughter. Marlene took advantage of the confusion of the arrival to discreetly distance herself from the group. Her years of experience as a nurse gave her quick access to the hospital laboratory, where a former colleague was waiting for her with a manila envelope. "I managed to process the test with maximum urgency," the technician whispered. "The results are conclusive." With trembling hands, Marlene placed the envelope in her lab coat. The DNA test she had arranged during the layover confirmed her suspicions, but now she needed to find a way to use this information without putting Lily at greater risk. On the third floor, Dr. Reynolds was already waiting in the cardiac ward. His tired eyes revealed concern about the urgent case he had just received. He quickly examined the exams Bethany presented, his eyebrows furrowing with each new page. "Something is not clear in these results," he commented, adjusting his glasses. "The values seem—" "We don't have time for questioning," Bethany interrupted him sharply. "The girl needs a transplant in the next few hours. The heart is already on its way, and Mr. Sterling has agreed to pay for the entire procedure." "Isn't that right, Mr. Sterling?" Trent, who watched Lily through the glass of the exam room, only nodded mechanically. His face was marked by a deep pain that went far beyond financial worry. The girl, lying on the stretcher, seemed strangely serene, as if she were just sleeping. "I need the authorization for admission and the guardianship documents," Dr. Reynolds requested, still suspicious. Bethany quickly opened her folder, but her hands trembled so much that several papers spilled onto the floor. As she bent down to pick them up, Marlene noticed something that made her hold her breath. Among the documents were medical prescriptions with different handwriting, all prescribed for Lily. "Let me help you," Marlene offered, taking the opportunity to discreetly examine the papers. Her heart raced as she confirmed her suspicions. The prescriptions were forged, prescribing inadequate doses of medication that could simulate cardiac symptoms. At this moment, Lily began to stir on the stretcher. Her small fingers squeezed the sheet, and her breathing became irregular. Dr. Reynolds rushed to examine her, but Bethany was faster. "She needs the medication now," she declared, already pulling a syringe from her bag. "Wait!" Marlene shouted, no longer able to contain herself. "Doctor, I need to show you something urgent." What followed happened in a matter of seconds. Bethany, in a brusque movement, tried to apply the injection to Lily. Trent, realizing the affliction on Marlene's face, grabbed the guardian's arm. The syringe fell to the floor, and the suspicious contents spilled across the hospital floor. "What is happening here?" Dr. Reynolds demanded, his authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. Marlene took advantage of the confusion to hand the doctor not only the envelope with the DNA test, but also the evidence she had collected during the flight. Photos of Lily's bruises, samples of the suspicious drugs found in Bethany's bag, and recordings of the conversations on the plane. "This woman is deliberately causing heart symptoms in the girl," Marlene revealed, her voice trembling with indignation. "The guardianship documents are forged. She discovered that Lily was Mr. Sterling's daughter and orchestrated this entire plan to extort him." Bethany's face lost all color. Her eyes frantically scanned the room like a cornered animal seeking escape. But before she could react, 2 hospital security guards were already blocking the door. "Your ambition almost cost the life of an innocent child," Trent spoke, his voice laden with a controlled anger. "How could you?" But Bethany just laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "You talk about ambition. You, who abandoned Eileen pregnant to build your empire? Who denied all her attempts to tell you about your daughter? I just gave Lily what you never cared to give." The words hit Trent like physical blows. He staggered, leaning against the wall. The truth of his actions, the weight of his choices, everything crushed him with overwhelming force. Dr. Reynolds, after quickly examining the evidence presented by Marlene, was already activating his team. "The girl needs immediate detox. Years of incorrect medication may have caused serious damage." Trent watched helplessly as the doctors transferred Lily to the ICU. Her small face was pale, but there was still a soft resemblance to Eileen in her delicate features. How could he have been so blind? How could he have allowed his only daughter to suffer so much? "Mr. Sterling." Marlene gently touched his arm. "She's going to need you a lot now. Not as the successful businessman, but as a father." Silent tears streamed down Trent's face as he rested his hand on the glass of the ICU, watching the doctors work. On the other side, small blue eyes opened briefly, meeting his, and in that brief moment of connection, he knew that his life would never be the same. Bethany was taken away by security, still shouting threats and accusations, but her words no longer mattered. The truth had been revealed, although its price was too high. Now it remained for Trent to face the consequences of his choices and, above all, to try to regain the right to be called a father. In the ICU, the machines beeped at a constant rhythm, measuring each beat of Lily's small heart. A heart that, despite all the suffering, still had room for forgiveness and love. But the road to recovery would be long, and many truths still needed to be confronted. The hours dragged on like decades in the ICU hallway. Trent remained motionless, like a statue of suffering before the glass that separated him from Lily. His Italian suit, once impeccable, was rumpled and stained with coffee. The deep circles under his eyes betrayed sleepless nights, but he refused to leave. Dr. Reynolds passed by frequently to update him on Lily's condition. The girl was responding well to the detoxification treatment, but her small body had suffered greatly from the inadequate medications. Each new medical report was like a stab in Trent's chest, revealing the extent of the damage caused by his absence. "You need to rest," Marlene insisted, bringing another cup of coffee. She also had not left the hospital, dividing her time between caring for Lily and supporting Trent. "I can't," he replied, his voice hoarse from crying so much. "What if she wakes up? What if she needs me?" At that moment, a social worker from the hospital approached with a thick folder in her hands. "Mr. Sterling, we need to talk about Lily's legal situation." Trent felt his heart clench. With Bethany arrested and the DNA test confirming his paternity, he would need to face the legal consequences of his years of abandonment. The social worker patiently explained the process of paternity acknowledgement and custody. "It won't be easy," she warned. "You'll have to prove that you can offer a stable and loving environment. The history of neglect will weigh against you." The words were harsh but fair. Trent knew he deserved every obstacle. As he signed the first documents, his hands trembled as he wrote "Father" in the kinship field. It was the first time he had officially assumed that role. During the early morning hours, while Marlene rested in a nearby armchair, Trent found the courage to open the bag that Eileen had left for Lily. Inside, in addition to clothes and toys, there was a handwritten diary. The pages were yellowed and some stained with tears. "Dear Lily," began the first entry, "I write these words so that one day you will understand. Your father is not a bad man, just someone who got lost along the way. When I met him during the factory fire, I saw in his eyes the same spark that I now see in yours." Trent had to stop several times during the reading, suffocated by emotion. Eileen had documented every important moment, the first steps, the first words, the frustrated attempts to contact him. There was no anger in her words, just a deep sadness and a persistent hope that one day he would understand what he had lost. "Mr. Sterling," the soft voice of a nurse brought him back to the present. "She's waking up." The world seemed to spin. Slower when Trent entered the ICU room, properly gowned. Lily blinked a few times, her small eyes trying to adjust to the light. When she finally focused on his face, there was no recognition, only curiosity. "Hi," he whispered, feeling as if his heart could explode. Lily tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Marlene quickly offered some water with a spoon. The girl drank slowly, her eyes never leaving Trent's face. "You're the man from the plane," she finally said, her voice as fragile as her body. "The one with the parachute." Trent nodded, silent tears streaming down his face. "Yes, it's me. How are you feeling?" "Tired," she replied, pausing before asking, "Where is Aunt Bethany?" The innocent question hit Trent like a punch. How to explain to a 5-year-old that she had been manipulated and hurt by someone she trusted? How to tell her that he, her own father, had allowed it to happen through his neglect? Marlene sensed his dilemma and intervened gently. "Lily, honey, Aunt Bethany had to leave. But now you have other people who will take care of you, people who love you very much." The girl processed the information in silence, her fingers playing with the edge of the sheet. Then, to everyone's surprise, she asked, "Did you know my mom?" The question caught Trent off guard. His first instinct was to lie, protecting her from the painful truth. But looking into her eyes, so like Eileen's, he knew he needed to be honest. "Yes," he replied, his voice choked. "Your mother was the most special person I've ever known. And I made a lot of mistakes, Lily, mistakes that hurt you both." "Mom always said you were very busy," Lily commented without accusation in her childish voice. "She showed your pictures in the newspaper and said that one day you would have time to meet us." Each word was like a blade piercing Trent's heart. The innocence with which Lily spoke of his abandonment, the way Eileen had protected his image, even after everything, was more than he deserved. "Now I have all the time in the world," he promised, gently holding her small hand. "If you let me, I want to spend every minute getting to know you, being part of your life." Lily looked at their hands clasped together for a long moment. Then, with the wisdom that only children possess, she said, "Mom is busy now, too. She went to live with the little angels." Trent couldn't hold back a sob. Marlene discreetly wiped her own tears as she watched father and daughter begin their journey of reconnection. It was a fragile moment, built on the foundations of much suffering, but also filled with hope. On the bedside table next to the bed, the small toy parachute rested as a symbol. Sometimes Trent thought, it is necessary to jump in the dark, face our deepest fears, to find the way back home. And he was determined not to waste this second chance. The days in the hospital turned into weeks. Lily's recovery was slow but steady. Each small victory was celebrated as a miracle, the first genuine smile, the first wheelchair ride down the hall, the first complete meal without nausea. Trent was present at every moment, learning to be a father in the small things. One morning, as he was helping Lily with breakfast, his phone rang insistently. It was his assistant, desperate about the situation at the company. Shares were plummeting since the story had leaked to the press. Investors demanded explanations, contracts were being cancelled, and the reputation he had taken years to build was crumbling like a sandcastle. "I need your urgent signature on some documents," the assistant pleaded. "The company may not survive if we don't take drastic measures now." Trent looked at Lily, who was trying to convince Marlene to put more chocolate in her oatmeal. The everyday scene struck him with unexpected force. His daughter was there, alive, smiling after so much suffering. What importance did a company have compared to that? "Sell everything," he replied simply. "Use the money to pay the employees and suppliers. The rest doesn't matter anymore." He hung up the phone, ignoring the protests on the other end. Lily watched him with curiosity. "Are you sad, Uncle Trent?" He still hadn't asked her to call him Dad. He didn't feel worthy of that title. "No, honey, just making some important decisions." "Difficult decisions like jumping with a parachute?" she asked, referring to the game that brought them closer. "On the plane." "Something like that," he smiled, sitting down next to her. "Sometimes we need to let go of the things we think are important to hold on to what is really precious." That afternoon, Dr. Reynolds brought worrying news. Tests showed that Lily's heart was more fragile than they had imagined. Years of incorrect medication had caused damage that would need to be constantly monitored. "She will need special care," the doctor explained. "Treatments, regular checkups, a very specific routine. It won't be easy." "I'll do whatever is necessary," Trent replied without hesitation. But the social worker, who was closely following the case, expressed her concerns. "Mr. Sterling, you are about to lose everything. How do you intend to provide the structure that Lily needs?" The question hit him like a slap. It was true. His empire was crumbling, his bank account dwindled with each passing day, and soon he would no longer have the luxury to which he was accustomed. How could he take care of a sick child in those conditions? It was Marlene who came up with a solution. "My sister has a small apartment near Central Park. She's moving upstate and wants to rent it out. The value is affordable and the location is perfect, near the hospital and good schools." Trent, who had never considered living in a modest apartment, felt a pang of fear. But then Lily had another crisis, and his priorities instantly rearranged themselves. What did the size of a house matter when his daughter was struggling to breathe? The night brought an unexpected discovery. While arranging Lily's things, he found a drawing book. In the colorful pages, there were several versions of herself, one flying with angel wings, another wearing a superhero cape, and a third, which made his heart clench, showing 3 people holding hands, her, Eileen, and a man in a suit that could only be him. "Mommy helped me make this," Lily explained, waking up from a nap. "She said that one day we were going to be a real family." The child's simple words carried the weight of all the broken promises, of all the shattered dreams. Trent sat on the edge of the bed, holding the drawing with trembling hands. "You know, Lily," he began, choosing his words carefully, "sometimes adults make very big mistakes, mistakes that hurt people we love. I made a lot of those mistakes." "Mommy said that everyone makes mistakes," Lily replied, her voice sleepy. but that the important thing is to try to fix them. The childish wisdom left him speechless. How had Eileen managed to raise such an understanding child, so full of love, even after everything he had done? "Can I tell you a secret?" Lily continued, her eyes beginning to close. "I always knew you were my dad. Mommy had a picture of you on her bedside table, and every night we prayed for you to come meet us." Trent felt as if all the air had been sucked from his lungs. He held his daughter's small hand, watching her fall asleep. The machines beeped softly, marking the rhythm of a heart that, despite all the damage, still beat with surprising strength. In the hallway, Marlene was organizing the paperwork for Lily's transfer. There would still be many battles ahead. The adaptation to the new life, the continuous treatments, the fight for definitive custody. But looking at his sleeping daughter, Trent knew that he had finally found his true purpose. The empire he had built could crumble. The millions in his account could evaporate. None of that mattered anymore. His true fortune was there, breathing softly, dreaming of parachute jumps and complete families. And he would do anything to deserve the title he had so neglected, that of father. 6 months had passed since that fateful plane trip. The modest apartment near Central Park was very different from the mansions that Trent used to inhabit, but there was something special about that small and cozy space. The walls, once white and lifeless, were now decorated with Lily's colorful drawings, portraits of her with Eileen, and the inseparable toy parachute hanging like a mobile over her bed. On that Sunday morning, Trent was in the kitchen trying to prepare oatmeal without burning it, a skill he was still trying to master. The smell of burnt milk often filled the apartment, but Lily never complained. She just laughed and said that the burnt oatmeal tasted like love. "Dad, you're burning it again!" she shouted from the living room, where she was playing with her paper airplanes. The word "dad" still made his heart jump. It had taken 3 months of daily coexistence, countless nights of stories and bandages exchanged, until she finally decided to use it. "It's not burnt," he protested, although the smoke rising from the pot contradicted him. "It's caramelized." The sound of Lily's laughter was like music. After so many months of intensive treatment, she was finally starting to look like a normal 5-year-old. Her hair, once thin and brittle due to the wrong medication, now shone healthy, with that same stubborn strand falling over her forehead. The doorbell rang, announcing Marlene's arrival. She came every Sunday, bringing not only her medical knowledge, but also a friendship that had become fundamental to both of them. Today, however, her visit had a special purpose. "I brought a surprise," she announced, carrying a thick folder. The judge finally signed the documents for definitive custody. Trent sat down heavily on the sofa, his hands trembling as he took the papers. There it was, in black ink on official paper. He was, legally and for all purposes, Lily's father. Not only her biological parent, but her guardian, protector, and caregiver. "There's one more thing," Marlene continued, her voice gentle. "I found this among the old things at the hospital." It was a letter, the paper yellowed with age. Eileen's elegant handwriting was unmistakable. "Dear Trent, if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally found your way back to our daughter. I don't know how much time has passed, nor what circumstances have led us to this moment. I only know that despite everything, I never lost hope. Lily is so much like you, not only in appearance, but in the inner strength that few can see. She fights like you fought in that fire. She resists like you resisted the burns. She dreams like you dreamed before the business world hardened your heart. I am not writing to cause guilt or remorse. I write because even in the most difficult moments, when fatigue and loneliness weighed too heavily, I always knew there was goodness in you. I saw it in the way you looked at me for the first time in the ICU, how you held my hand during your physical therapy sessions, how you talked about your dreams of making a difference in the world. I know that life has taken you down other paths, that your choices have distanced you from us, but I also know that love has a way of finding its way back. Our daughter is proof of that. Take care of her, Trent. Not with your fortune or your power, but with your heart. Teach her that sometimes we need to jump in the dark to find the light. Show her that the true value of a person is not in what they possess, but in the love they are able to give. And if one day she asks about me, say that your greatest gift was being able to love her from the first moment, that every moment with her was a blessing, that even in the darkest nights her smile was my light, with eternal love, Eileen. When Trent finished reading, his tears had stained the paper. Lily, who had approached silently, touched his wet face with small fingers. "Don't cry, Dad," she whispered. "Mommy is happy now. She always said that one day you would learn to make oatmeal right." Trent's laughter mixed with sobs filled the apartment. Marlene, discreetly wiping her own eyes, began to set the table for breakfast. The oatmeal was definitely burnt, but no one seemed to care. On the wall of the living room, a new picture had been hung, the faded photo of Eileen with baby Lily, now next to a recent one, showing father and daughter smiling in the park. Between the two images, the small toy parachute hung as a symbol that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. On that Sunday morning, as the sun streamed through the windows of the modest apartment, Trent finally understood. His previous life, with all its luxury and power, had been just a long fall. The real flight began when he found the courage to loosen the bonds of ambition and hold the small hand that guided him back home. Lily, balancing on tiptoe to reach her burnt oatmeal, smiled that smile that was so much like Eileen's, and Trent knew with a certainty that no fortune could buy that he had finally learned to fly. "Dad," she called, spreading oatmeal on the table, "can we make more paper airplanes later? I want to teach you how to make one that really flies." "Of course, my love," he replied, his heart overflowing. "We have all the time in the world." And they did, because some falls take us exactly where we need to be. Some losses present us with immeasurable gains. And some loves, even born of regret and pain, have the power to heal all wounds and build new beginnings. In Central Park, in front of the apartment, other families strolled, enjoying the Sunday. No one there would be able to tell that that man, in a simple shirt, helping a girl launch paper airplanes, had once been one of the most powerful businessmen in the country, or that that smiling child had faced so much suffering in her few years of life. But perhaps they could see, in the gleam in both their eyes, that love really has a way of finding its way, and that sometimes, to reach the most important heights, we don't need real wings, just a heart willing to fly.